The first time I saw him, I thought he was just another man who didn't belong in a place like mine. Too polished, too silent, too dangerous for a cafe that smelled of burnt espresso and cheap detergent. It was late, close to midnight, when the doorbell chimed and the air changed. That's the only way I can describe it. The air shifted like it had been waiting for him. I was wiping the same table for the third time, pretending not to notice the man in the black coat who stood outside the window. He wasn't moving. He just watched. Maybe he was lost. Or maybe I was already lying to myself. The neighborhood wasn't one where lost men came to ask for directions. They came to disappear. When he finally stepped inside, the hum of the ceiling fan seemed to hush. His eyes, dark and unreadable, swept across the empty cafe like he was scanning for exits, threats, and ghosts all at once. He didn't look at me at first. He looked at the corners, the windows, the clock, the street outside. Then finally, at me. "Kitchen's closed," I said softly, gripping the rag like it was armor. "I didn't come for food," he replied, his voice low, controlled. The kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to be obeyed. He glanced toward the back of the cafe, where a woman sat in a booth, her hands trembling as she tried to lift a cup. That was when I saw her. His mother, though I didn't know it yet. A small, elegant woman with gray hair pinned neatly, her eyes bright but unfocused. She moved her hands slowly, awkwardly, forming signs that didn't quite connect. He stepped toward her and sat down without saying a word. I tried not to stare, but I couldn't help it. There was something raw in the way he looked at her. A tenderness that didn't match the man's sharp, lethal presence. When she signed again, he nodded, answering with slow, practiced gestures. But I could tell he didn't fully understand. His fingers hesitated. His eyes searched hers. And then she started to cry. Silent tears, trembling lips, her hands trying to form words that wouldn't come. Before I even thought about it, I walked over. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "May I?" Both of them turned to me, her with surprise, him with suspicion. I signed to her gently. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" Her face lit up, her hands flying in a rush of movement, too fast for him to follow, but I caught every word. He doesn't understand me anymore. He forgets the signs. He forgets me. I swallowed, glancing at him. "She's asking if you're all right," I said carefully, softening the truth. His jaw tightened. "Tell her I'm fine." When I translated, she smiled weakly, but I saw the flicker of pain in her eyes. It was the strangest triangle. A woman trapped in silence, her son imprisoned by his own walls, and me, a waitress who'd just walked into their private world. I told myself to step back, to let them be. But when I turned away, her hand reached out and caught mine. She signed again. "Stay." And for reasons I can't explain, I did. He watched me the whole time, not with desire, not yet, but with the kind of focus that made my skin prickle. When I handed his mother a napkin, when I knelt to retrieve her dropped spoon, his eyes never left me. They were the eyes of a man used to measuring people, weighing their intentions, their secrets, their worth. After a while, he stood. "I'll take her home." His mother protested in silence, signing quickly. "No, I want her to come with us, just for a while, please." I smiled awkwardly. "She's asking if I could walk her out, just to the car." He hesitated. A muscle ticked in his jaw. Then he nodded once. Outside, the street was empty, the lamps humming with the faint buzz of dying bulbs. A black car waited at the curb, engine running, windows tinted. Two men stood nearby, too still to be anything but guards. I didn't know then that everyone who worked for him moved like that, half shadow, half soldier. When I helped her into the car, she held my hand a second longer than necessary, her eyes pleading. Come visit me. Please. He won't let anyone in. I nodded without thinking. Then I heard his voice behind me. You know sign language. I turned. My sister was deaf, I said. She passed away last year. His gaze softened, just for a heartbeat. I'm sorry. Don't be, I murmured. She taught me how to listen without hearing. He studied me like he was trying to decide if I was lying. And for a moment, I thought he might just walk away. But instead, he asked, What's your name? Lena. He repeated it quietly, like tasting the sound. Lena. Then he extended his hand, a gesture that felt far too formal, too deliberate. When I placed my hand in his, I expected warmth. Instead, I felt the weight of something else. Control. His palm was steady, his fingers firm, his touch almost claiming. I'm Adrian, he said. My mother doesn't talk much these days. I noticed, I said softly, but she listens. That earned me the faintest smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes but changed the shape of his face, softening something cold. He stepped closer, so close I could smell the faint trace of smoke and rain on his coat. You shouldn't walk home alone this late, Lena. I live 3 blocks away. That's 3 blocks too many, he said. Something in his tone, protective or possessive I couldn't tell, made me freeze. I'm fine, I said, taking a small step back. His eyes lingered on me, unreadable. I'll have someone drive you. That's not necessary. It wasn't a suggestion. The words weren't shouted, but they carried the weight of command. The 2 men by the car shifted slightly, waiting for his signal. And in that moment, I realized who he was. Not just a man with guards or a mother who couldn't speak, but someone feared. Someone obeyed. I took a slow breath. Mr. Adrian, I appreciate it, but I don't get into cars with strangers. He tilted his head, his lips curving into a faint smirk. You just spoke to my mother. That makes you family. There it was. That mix of charm and danger, like sugar over glass. I didn't know whether to laugh or run. He nodded to one of the men. Follow her. Make sure she gets home safe. I opened my mouth to protest, but he'd already turned away. The car door shut, the engine roared, and just like that, he was gone. The street felt colder after he left, like he'd taken the warmth with him. I walked fast, trying to shake off the strangeness of it all. The tension in his eyes, the silent plea in his mother's hands, the way my pulse had raced when he said my name. But halfway home, I noticed the car. Black. Same make, same color, moving just slow enough to match my pace. My chest tightened. I turned a corner. It followed. I stopped. It stopped. The window rolled down an inch, not enough to see a face, just a flicker of movement. Then the car drove off, disappearing into the darkness. I reached my apartment trembling, not sure if I should be afraid or flattered or both. The next morning, when I arrived at the cafe, a single white rose lay on the counter. No note, no name, just the faintest trace of smoke and rain. And that's when I knew. Whatever had started last night wasn't over. It had only just begun. The next morning felt different, as if the world had shifted half an inch and I was the only one who noticed. The cafe smelled the same. Bitter coffee, old sugar, and rain leaking through the cracked window frame. But the quiet no longer felt peaceful. It felt watched. I told myself the rose was a coincidence. Maybe someone left it for a lover. Maybe it wasn't meant for me. But the truth was harder to ignore when I found the small silver cufflink beside it, engraved with an A. Adrian. I held it between my fingers, feeling its weight, remembering the way his hand had felt around mine. Steady, inevitable, dangerous. New admirer? Rosa asked, sliding behind the counter with a grin. She'd worked here longer than I had, loud enough to drown out ghosts if they dared to visit. Not exactly, I murmured, slipping the cufflink into my apron pocket before she could see the engraved letter. You should get out more, Lena, she teased. Meet someone who doesn't leave mystery gifts on the counter. I smiled faintly, but the sound of the bell above the door made me freeze. He wasn't supposed to be here. And yet, there he was. Adrian, in daylight, without the shadowed corners or humming streetlights to hide him. Somehow, he looked even more out of place among the cracked linoleum floors and squeaking fans. His presence made everything else seem faded, like the color bled out of the world just to make room for him. Rosa's chatter died mid-sentence. Even she felt it, that quiet authority he carried without effort. Good morning, he said, his tone smooth but clipped. His eyes landed on me like he'd come for no one else. I swallowed hard. Coffee? He smiled faintly. Black. I turned to pour it, pretending my hands weren't trembling. The sound of the liquid hitting the cup was too loud, too deliberate. When I set it down, he didn't touch it. He just leaned forward, elbows resting on the counter, gaze locked on me. Did you find the rose? I hesitated. I did. And the cufflink? I'm guessing that was yours. His mouth curved slightly. You guessed right? I looked at him. You didn't have to send anything. I didn't have to, he said, but I wanted to. His words hung in the air, simple, but they felt heavy. I could sense Rosa's curiosity from behind me, but she wisely disappeared into the kitchen. Adrian's eyes softened, studying my face like he was trying to memorize something. My mother asked about you this morning. I blinked. She did? She doesn't usually talk about people, but she remembered your hands. My hands? She said you spoke gently. Something in my chest tightened. She's kind. She didn't have to invite me to sit with her. She doesn't invite strangers, he said quietly. She hasn't for years. His tone shifted, lower, almost warning. I wasn't sure if it was a confession or a threat, maybe both. When he finally sipped his coffee, I saw the faint scar near his wrist. Thin, pale, deliberate. A knife mark, old and healed. It wasn't the kind of scar people forgot about. He caught me staring. You're observant. Bad habit, I said. For some, he replied. For others, it's survival. The words sent a chill through me. Before I could respond, a car honked outside, sharp, impatient. He looked toward the window briefly, then back at me. I have to go. He placed a bill on the counter, too large for a single cup of coffee. I started to protest, but his expression silenced me. Keep it, he said, for the roses. And just like that, he was gone again, leaving behind the faint scent of his cologne. Smoke, rain, and something metallic underneath. On that evening, I locked up the cafe alone. The streets were slick from another downpour, and the lights blurred across puddles like melted stars. I pulled my jacket tighter and walked fast, pretending not to notice the black car parked across from the corner bakery. It had been there the night before, too. I tried to convince myself it wasn't his. But when the headlights flicked on just as I crossed the street, my heart lurched. I turned down a side alley, my footsteps echoing against wet brick. A shadow moved near the far end, tall, still, waiting. Lena! The voice stopped me cold. Adrian stepped forward, his coat dark against the dim yellow glow of the streetlight. You shouldn't walk home alone, I exhaled sharply. You've said that before. And you didn't listen before. I folded my arms. Are you following me? He smiled faintly. If I were, you wouldn't know. The answer should have scared me. Instead, it made something stir in my chest that I didn't want to name. You don't need to worry about me, I said. Someone does, he replied. There were men outside the cafe earlier, watching you. I frowned. Probably customers. He shook his head. Not the kind who come for coffee. He took a step closer, his voice low, controlled. You don't understand what kind of world you just stepped into, Lena. My world isn't one you can touch without consequence. Then why are you here? I asked. Why involve me at all? His jaw tightened. For the first time, he didn't have an answer ready. I don't know, he admitted finally. Maybe because when you spoke to her, she smiled for the first time in years. My heart softened. Just for a moment. Your mother misses you. I know, he said quietly. And I miss her. But I can't give her peace until my enemies stop looking for ways to use her. He ran a hand through his hair, the movement almost weary. And now you've met her, they'll wonder who you are. A cold wave of realization hit me. You think they'll come after me? I know they will, he said. Unless I make it clear you're under my protection. That's not how this works, I snapped. You can't just decide that. He stepped closer until I could feel his breath on my skin. I don't decide. I command. His tone was calm, but the air between us vibrated with tension. Not just fear, but something darker. His eyes dropped briefly to my lips, then back to my eyes, and for a heartbeat the world stopped. I should have walked away. I should have run, but I didn't. Do you always get what you want? I whispered. Until now, he said, his gaze unwavering. Yes. The sound of an engine interrupted the silence. A dark van turned the corner, its headlights cutting through the mist. Adrian's eyes flicked toward it instantly. Get behind me. What? Now. Before I could react, he pulled me close, one arm wrapping around my waist, pressing me against the wall as the van slowed beside us. The window rolled down. A flash of metal, gun barrel, caught the light. I barely had time to gasp before Adrian spun, pushing me to the ground as the first shot rang out. The sound was deafening, sharp, final. Glass shattered nearby. He crouched low beside me, his coat shielding us both, his gun drawn with terrifying precision. Stay down, he ordered. The van screeched away seconds later, tires screaming, against the wet road. Adrian's breathing was steady. Too steady, like this was routine. He glanced at me, eyes hard. You see now? I nodded, trembling. This is what happens to people who get too close. He holstered his weapon, then stood, offering his hand. Come with me, Lena. You're not safe here anymore. I hesitated, staring at his outstretched hand, the same one that had once felt like a promise, and now felt like a sentence. I don't even know who you are, I whispered. He looked at me for a long moment, rain dripping from his hair. You do, he said softly. You just wish you didn't. He turned, walking toward the waiting black car, the same one that had followed me before. For a few seconds, I stood frozen in the rain, heart pounding, torn between reason and instinct. Then, against everything I'd ever told myself about survival, I followed him. And as the car door shut behind me, I knew I'd just crossed a line I could never return from. I didn't speak for the first few minutes of the drive. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, gold streaks cutting through the rain. Adrian sat beside me in silence, his expression carved from stone, jaw tense, eyes fixed ahead. He hadn't said a word since we got in the car, and yet his presence filled every inch of space. Heavy, consuming, magnetic. My fingers twisted in my lap, still trembling from the sound of the gunshot. The smell of smoke clung to him, faint but undeniable. It didn't come from cigarettes. It was the scent of something older. Danger, violence, control. Who were they? I finally whispered. His gaze didn't shift. People who want to hurt me. And they tried to hurt you by... I hesitated, my voice breaking. By shooting at us? He turned his head slightly, eyes catching the light. No, Lena. They tried to hurt me by scaring you. I stared at him. Why? They don't even know me. He looked away again. They know now. I felt the words settle like ice in my chest. The car slowed as the streets grew emptier. We were leaving the city center, climbing toward the hills, where the air smelled different, cleaner but colder. The houses turned into mansions. Iron gates and hedges loomed past the glass. Finally, the car stopped in front of one of them. Tall, shadowed, the kind of place that looked like it belonged to someone untouchable. The driveway was lined with cypress trees, their branches arching like watchful guards. 2 men in suits stood by the entrance, waiting. Adrian got out first, then turned back, offering his hand. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I took it. His palm was warm, steady, grounding, the only steady thing in a night that had completely unraveled. Where are we? I asked softly. My home. Home. The word didn't suit him. A man like Adrian didn't belong to something as simple as a home. He belonged to power, to silence, to control. But as the front doors opened, I realized this place wasn't built for comfort. It was built for protection. Inside, the air was cool, faintly scented with cedar and something metallic, like polished steel. The foyer was grand. Marble floors, a staircase that spiraled upward like a spine of bone, and walls lined with paintings that were too dark to be beautiful. This way, he said. I followed him through hallways that felt endless. Guards stood at intervals, nodding as he passed. Their expressions were blank, loyal to the point of silence. Every detail was immaculate, from the candlelight glinting off the gold-trimmed mirrors to the faint hum of distant security systems. He led me into a sitting room, large, dimly lit, with a grand piano in the corner and a view of the rain-drenched garden beyond the glass. He poured something amber into a glass and turned toward me. Drink? I shook my head. No, I don't. It's not poison, he said, half smiling, and took a slow sip himself. You're safe here. I don't feel safe, I said quietly. You shouldn't, he replied. Not yet. That answer should have terrified me, but it only confused me more. I sat on the edge of the sofa, watching him pace slowly, like a caged predator trying to disguise its restlessness. What is this place really? I asked. He turned the glass in his hand, watching the liquid swirl. It's everything and nothing, he said. It's where decisions are made that never reach the newspapers. Where loyalty is currency. Where silence keeps people alive. I frowned. You're talking like a criminal. He met my gaze. Say it. I swallowed hard. Like a man people fear. His expression didn't change. People fear what they can't control. And you? I asked softly. Can anyone control you? His lips curved faintly, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. No one tries twice. The air between us shifted again, thicker, charged. I should have looked away, but I couldn't. There was something about him that drew me closer, even when I knew I shouldn't move at all. He set the glass down and walked toward me slowly, each step deliberate. You don't belong in this world, Lena, he said. You should be angry that I brought you here. Should I? Yes. Then why don't I feel angry? He stopped just inches away, his presence overwhelming, his voice lower. Because you're smart enough to know that anger is useless when you're already trapped. I felt his words like a whisper against my skin. My pulse raced, my breath shallow. You're scaring me, I murmured. Good, he said quietly. Fear keeps you alive. But his eyes betrayed him, just for a second. There was something there beneath the cold surface. Guilt, sadness, a loneliness so deep it almost looked like pain. He stepped back and ran a hand through his hair. You'll stay in the East Wing. There's security posted outside your door. No one will come near you without my permission." "I didn't agree to stay," I said. "You did when you got in that car." I stared at him, stunned. "That's not how consent works." He turned his back to me, staring out the window. "In my world, it's the only way it works." Silence stretched between us, long and unbearable. Finally, he said, "My mother will want to see you in the morning." That softened me again. "Is she here?" He nodded. "She lives upstairs. I moved her here after—" He paused, his shoulders tensing. "After my father died." The quiet in his voice was heavier than the words themselves. "I'm sorry," I said softly. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for something on the nearby table. A small silver cross on a chain. This belonged to her. She stopped wearing it after she lost her hearing. He held it out to me. "She said you should have it. Said you reminded her of the daughter she never had." The gesture caught me off guard. I took it gently, the metal cool against my skin. "She's very kind." Adrian nodded, his expression unreadable. "She trusts people too easily. It's a dangerous trait." "Maybe she sees something in me that you don't," I said. He looked at me then, eyes dark and searching. "You think I don't see you, Lena?" My voice faltered. "Do you?" He stepped forward again, slowly, until the space between us felt electrified. "I see everything," he said. "The way you hide your trembling hands when you're afraid. The way you hold your breath when you lie. The way you try to look at me like I'm a man instead of a monster." "I never said you were a monster," I whispered. "You didn't have to." Something about his tone, not defensive, not angry, just tired, made my chest ache. Before I could say anything, a knock at the door broke the silence. One of his men entered, murmuring something in Italian too low for me to catch. Adrian's jaw clenched. He turned to me. "Stay here." "Why? What's happening?" He was already at the door. "A problem," he said. "It's not your concern." "Adrian!" But he was gone before I could finish. The door shut with a soft but final click. I sat there, clutching the silver cross, heart pounding. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that felt like it was listening. Minutes passed, then footsteps echoed down the hall. Heavy, fast, urgent. I stood and stepped closer to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. I heard shouting, then a single word in English, sharp and cold. "Find her." My blood turned to ice. I backed away, breath catching. Whoever they were talking about, I didn't want to know. But then, somewhere deep inside the house, I heard the unmistakable sound of a door slamming open, and Adrian's voice, rough, furious, shouting my name. I should have known peace was only borrowed time in Adrian Moretti's world. For 2 days after that night, the mansion felt quieter than usual. Too quiet. The air carried the weight of secrets, like every wall held its breath waiting for something to go wrong. Adrian had vanished into his study again, doors locked, his voice echoing occasionally through the marble halls as he argued in Italian with men who never looked me in the eye when they passed. I didn't need to understand the words to feel the tension in them. It was the kind that curled around your ribs and refused to let go. His mother, sweet and silent as always, had sensed it too. When I brought her tea that morning, her hands trembled when she signed, "Stay close today." I smiled to reassure her, but the way her eyes darted to the windows told me she didn't believe my calm. Neither did I. The storm started around noon. It wasn't thunder. It was the sound of tires screeching outside the gates, the sharp metallic clang of something slamming shut, and the echo of men shouting. I froze in the hallway, my tray slipping from my hands, the porcelain shattering across the marble floor. The noise made Adrian's mother flinch, her teacup spilling in her lap. Before I could help her, footsteps thundered from the corridor. 2 guards stormed past, guns drawn. I stood there trembling, watching the calm order of the mansion dissolve into chaos. And then, Adrian appeared. He wasn't the man I'd met in the kitchen that night. His white shirt was half-buttoned, sleeves rolled to his elbows, his expression carved in stone. There was no softness, no warmth, just control. Cold, lethal control. "Get her upstairs," he ordered one of the guards, not even looking at me. "Now." His tone sliced through the panic like a blade. I wanted to protest, to tell him I could help, that I didn't want to be hidden like a child. But something in his eyes made my words die before they reached my lips. They weren't just angry. They were afraid. The guard led me upstairs to the guest wing, but as soon as the door shut, I turned the lock and pressed my ear to it. Muffled voices. Movement. Then gunfire. Short, sharp, too close. My chest clenched. I ran to the balcony, peeking through the curtains. Outside, black SUVs blocked the front drive. Men in dark suits were yelling, some ducking behind the stone fountain for cover. One of them fell. I bit my lip hard enough to taste blood. This wasn't the kind of life you could accidentally wander into. It was the kind that swallowed you whole. Then came the silence. Sudden. Heavy. Like the house itself was holding its breath. I waited, every second stretching longer than the last, until footsteps echoed down the hall again. Slow. Controlled. I gripped the doorknob, not sure whether to lock it tighter or throw it open. When it finally turned, I almost screamed. But it was him. Adrian. He stood there breathing hard, his collar stained with something dark. Not blood, I told myself. Please, not blood. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low but shaking slightly, as if anger and relief were fighting for control. I shook my head. "What's happening? Who are they?" He didn't answer right away. He walked past me, checking the windows, his hand hovering near his gun. The smell of gunpowder clung to him, sharp and bitter. "People who don't understand the word no," he finally said. "You're safe now." Safe. The word felt like a lie in this house. "You killed them," I whispered. Not as an accusation, just a truth. He looked at me then, really looked. The calm mask he always wore had cracked just enough for me to see the man beneath it. The one made of exhaustion, violence, and something dangerously close to guilt. "I protected what's mine," he said quietly. "And what am I in that equation?" I asked before I could stop myself. "One of your possessions?" His jaw tightened. "Don't do that, Lena." "Do what?" "Pretend I don't see what's happening around me?" "You told me once that silence was safer." "You were right. Because if I speak, I might say things you don't want to hear." He stepped closer, his presence heavy, magnetic. "You think I want this?" His voice broke slightly. "Every time I pull that trigger, it costs me. But if I don't, people die who shouldn't. You don't belong in this kind of world. Then why bring me into it?" That question hit harder than either of us expected. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The rain started outside, tapping softly against the glass like a warning. Adrian looked away first, his hands flexing as if he wanted to reach for me but didn't trust himself. "You shouldn't have stayed that night," he said almost to himself. "You should have run when you had the chance." I swallowed hard. It's too late for that now, isn't it? He looked up then, and I saw something I hadn't before. A crack in the armor. Fear, not for himself, but for me. He stepped closer until the air between us felt charged. "Lena, if you ever hear me say the word leave, you don't ask why. You just go. Promise me." I nodded, though my throat ached. "What's happening, Adrian?" He exhaled slowly. Someone inside the house betrayed me. They knew when to strike. They knew you'd be here. The blood drained from my face. You mean someone's been watching me? His silence was answer enough. The realization hit like ice in my veins. Every time I'd felt eyes on me in the corridor, every door that had closed too quickly, it hadn't been paranoia. It had been someone waiting. Before I could speak, the lights flickered. Then the sound came again, a single muffled shot from downstairs. Adrian's gun was in his hand before I could even move. He turned to me, voice cold again. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me. I grabbed his arm. Adrian. He paused. For a heartbeat, his gaze softened and his hand brushed my cheek. You shouldn't have ever met me, he murmured. But I'm not letting them touch you. Then he was gone. The echo of his footsteps faded down the hall. I stood there trembling, every muscle tight, staring at the door like it might dissolve any second. The minutes dragged, each one louder than the last, filled with distant shouting and the pounding of my own heart. Then, silence again. Too much silence. And then I heard it, the faint click of my doorknob turning. I woke before dawn, the pale blue light crawling through the cracks in the curtains like it was searching for something it shouldn't find. The mansion was silent. Too silent. The kind of quiet that presses against your ribs until you start hearing your own pulse in your ears. I sat up in the bed Adrian had insisted I sleep in. His bed, though he hadn't touched it last night. He'd left without a word after a phone call that turned his expression to stone. I hadn't seen him since. That was what kept me awake, even when I wanted to pretend it was just the unfamiliar sheets. I'd told myself I'd keep out of trouble, that I'd stay where it was safe, that I wouldn't go wandering into the parts of this house that felt more like a warning than a home. But by sunrise, I was already standing outside the west wing. The door was half hidden by the shadow of a staircase, the brass handle dulled with age and neglect. It wasn't locked. I wished it had been. The air changed the moment I stepped inside. It smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain. The floorboards creaked under my feet, echoing into the stillness like the house itself was holding its breath. I told myself I was only curious, only trying to understand the man who had saved me, frightened me, and consumed my thoughts in the same breath. But deep down, I knew it wasn't curiosity. It was compulsion. The first room was nothing more than a hallway lined with paintings, portraits of people I didn't recognize. Men in dark suits, women with unreadable eyes, a family tree painted in oil and shadow. Every face looked regal, powerful, untouchable, until I noticed one painting at the end that didn't fit. It was of a boy, maybe 8 years old. His hair was dark like Adrian's, his eyes that same pale gray but softer. His expression wasn't cold or calculating, it was scared. Someone had tried to slash the canvas down the middle, but the wound in the painting had been stitched crudely back together. My stomach turned as I leaned closer. There was writing scratched into the frame. You were supposed to die with them. I took a step back. My breath caught. Lena. His voice came from behind me, quiet but sharp. I turned, and there he was. Adrian stood in the doorway, wearing the same black shirt from last night, unbuttoned at the throat. His eyes looked darker in the morning light. He didn't look surprised to see me here, just disappointed, like this moment had always been inevitable. I told you never to come here, he said. I swallowed hard. Then why didn't you lock it? His jaw clenched. Because I trusted you. The silence that followed was unbearable. I looked back at the painting, at the stitched wound, then at him. Who is he? Adrian's expression barely flickered. No one. That's not true. He took a slow step toward me. I could smell him now, smoke and cedar, the faintest trace of whiskey. "Leave, Lena." But I didn't. I should have, but something in his tone broke through the fear. Beneath the command was something raw, something almost human. "I just want to understand," I whispered. He laughed once, softly, but there was no humor in it. "You think understanding makes this easier?" He turned away, running a hand through his hair. For a moment, I thought he'd walk out. Instead, he reached for a key hanging around his neck and unlocked the next door. "You wanted to see who I really am?" he said, his voice low. "Then come." The room beyond was dimly lit. A single bulb flickered overhead, revealing a table covered in photographs, newspaper clippings, and weapons lined with surgical precision. But my eyes caught on one thing. A stack of files stamped with the same family crest I'd seen in the paintings. On top was a death certificate. Name, Lorenzo Vitale. Age, 8. Under cause of death, the ink had been smeared until it was unreadable. I looked up at Adrian, heart hammering. "He's your brother." He didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation. His hands rested on the table, tense, veins standing out like wires. "He died the night my family was betrayed," Adrian said finally. His voice was almost a whisper. "Someone set fire to our home. My father, my mother, him, everyone but me. The only reason I'm standing here is because I was pulled out by the man who ordered it." I froze. "What?" He looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw the man beneath the armor. "He wanted me alive," Adrian said, "so I'd grow up to serve him, to kill for him, to become his weapon, the perfect loyal heir to the empire he stole." "Who?" I asked, though the dread in my stomach already knew the answer. Adrian's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "My uncle. The head of the Vitale family before I took it from him." I took a step back, my pulse racing. "Adrian, why are you telling me this?" "Because you needed to see it," he said. "The truth. What this world makes of people like me." "You think I'm dangerous, Lena?" His eyes locked on mine. "You're right, but not because I choose to be." The words hung between us, fragile and devastating. I could feel the distance between who he wanted to be and who he was forced to become. For a fleeting second, I wanted to reach out, to tell him he didn't have to carry it alone. But before I could, a noise echoed down the hall, a door slamming open. Adrian's head snapped toward the sound. The shift in him was instant. The man who had just bared his soul vanished, replaced by the cold, lethal Dawn I'd seen the night of the attack. He pressed a gun into my hand. I stared at it, horrified. "What?" "Stay behind me," he said. The footsteps were fast, purposeful, coming closer. Adrian moved like a shadow, his voice a low growl. "They found the breach. Someone inside leaked your presence." "Mine?" "You were followed here, Lena." The door burst open, and the world became noise, shouts, gunfire, the smell of smoke and metal. Adrian moved with terrifying precision, returning fire, dragging me behind the heavy table. I could barely breathe. Somewhere between the chaos, I saw blood bloom across his sleeve. When it was over, the room reeked of gunpowder. 2 men lay motionless by the door. Adrian's breathing was heavy, his eyes burning with fury. He didn't look at them. He looked at me. "This," he said quietly, "is what it means to love me." For a moment, I thought he'd lost his mind. Then I saw the pain beneath his words, the exhaustion in his stance, the blood dripping down his arm. He took the gun from my trembling hands, placed it on the table, and leaned in close. "Now you know who I am," he whispered. "So tell me, Lena, do you still want to stay?" Before I could answer, a voice crackled through his earpiece. It was male, panicked. "Boss, she's gone. The old woman, your mother. She's not in her room. Adrian's face went white. He turned to me, his eyes suddenly wide with something I'd never seen before. Fear. Stay here, he said, but his voice shook for the first time. He ran out the door before I could move. I stood there frozen, surrounded by silence and blood, staring at the door that had just swallowed him whole. And for the first time, I realized I might have just fallen for a man whose entire world was built on ghosts. The house was no longer silent. It pulsed with chaos. Men rushed through the halls, voices sharp and overlapping, radios crackling with code words I didn't understand. The scent of smoke still clung to my hair, my clothes, my skin. I stood frozen in the West Wing's doorway, staring at the blood Adrian had left behind when he ran. It wasn't until one of his men nearly collided with me that I remembered to breathe. "Where is he?" I asked. The man, broad, expressionless, his black suit stained with dirt, hesitated. "The boss is handling it." "Handling what?" He didn't answer, and I didn't need him to. I already knew. I followed the trail through the corridors, past marble floors smeared with footprints, past the broken glass glittering like ice. Every room I passed looked the same. Lavish, beautiful, suffocating. A golden cage shaking on its hinges. I found him in the courtyard. The morning sun had barely risen, but he was already drenched in sweat and fury. Two of his men stood in front of him, their faces pale, their hands trembling. "She couldn't have gotten far," one said. Adrian slammed his fist into the table between them. The sound cracked through the air like thunder. "She's deaf," he snarled. "She can't hear danger coming. If she's out there—" He stopped himself, his hands curled into fists. For the first time, I saw what helplessness looked like on him. I stepped forward without thinking. "Adrian!" He turned, his eyes finding mine instantly. Whatever mask he'd worn before had shattered. "You shouldn't be here." "You said that last time," I whispered. "And here we are again." For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he exhaled, the anger draining from his posture. He looked tired, no, haunted. "They took her, Lena. My mother. They knew exactly when to strike." "Who?" He hesitated, then motioned for me to follow. We moved through a side door into a narrow hall lined with security monitors. Each screen showed a different part of the estate: gardens, gates, corridors. On one of them, I caught a glimpse of a white van leaving the property hours earlier. Adrian's jaw tightened. The symbol on that van. It belongs to the Bellini family. I frowned. "I thought they were your allies." "They were." His tone was dark, final. "Until last night." I watched him reach for the phone, barking orders in Italian so fast I could only catch fragments. Men, cars, checkpoints. He was building an army before my eyes, his command absolute. But when he hung up, the silence returned, and I saw his hands shaking. He pressed his palms to the table, breathing hard. "She doesn't deserve this," he said quietly. "She spent her life in silence. She taught me that silence could mean peace. Now it only means pain." I stepped closer, unsure if he wanted comfort or distance. "We'll find her," I said. "You always find what's yours." His eyes lifted to mine. There was something in them. Something dangerous, yes, but also broken. "You don't understand, Lena. They took her to get to me. To remind me that no matter how powerful I think I am, they can still reach into my home and tear out the only thing that keeps me human." "You think they'll hurt her?" "They already have." His voice cracked on the last word. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was too full of ghosts. I watched his shoulders tighten as he looked at the monitors again. Every screen reflected a piece of him. Control, rage, fear, grief. Then he turned suddenly, walking past me toward the main corridor. I followed him again, my bare feet whispering against the marble. "Where are you going?" "To end this," he said. There was something about the way he said it that chilled me. I grabbed his arm. "You can't just—" "I can." He looked down at me, and for the first time there was no warmth in his eyes. "You don't know what they did to her last time." I froze. "Last time?" He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "When I was 17, they cut out her tongue because she tried to warn me about a hit. She survived, but she never spoke again." I didn't realize I was crying until he brushed a tear from my cheek with his thumb. "Don't look at me like that," he said softly. "I don't need your pity." "It's not pity," I whispered. "It's—" I stopped, unable to say the rest. He smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Don't finish that sentence. You'll regret it." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He answered instantly. I couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but I saw the change in him. His eyes narrowing, his spine straightening. "Where?" he asked. Then, "Don't touch her. I'm on my way." He hung up, pocketed the gun at his hip, and looked at me. "They found her." "Is she alive?" He hesitated. "For now." "Then I'm coming with you." "No." "Yes." His jaw set. "You don't understand, Lena. If you come with me, you'll see things you can't unsee." I met his gaze. "Then stop pretending I haven't already." He stared at me for a long moment, and then something in his expression softened. "You're either the bravest woman I've ever met," he said, "or the most foolish." "Maybe both." He didn't argue. He just took my hand. His grip was firm, grounding. It shouldn't have comforted me, but it did. Outside, the sky was streaked with gray. The city stretched out below the hill like a secret waiting to be kept. We drove fast. No music, no words. Only the hum of the engine and the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. Halfway through the ride, I dared to glance at him. His face was unreadable, but his hand was white-knuckled on the wheel. I realized he wasn't driving toward a rescue. He was driving toward revenge. When we stopped, it was at the edge of an abandoned shipping yard. The air smelled like rust and rain. Adrian's men were already there, weapons drawn, silent as ghosts. He turned to me before stepping out. "Stay in the car." "Adrian." "Please, Lena. Just this once." It was the first time he'd ever said please. I nodded. He got out, the door slamming shut behind him, and for a moment I could see him through the windshield, the man I had tried to understand. Not a monster, not a savior, something in between. Then the scene unfolded in fragments. Shouting. A figure dragged out of a van. Adrian's voice, low and furious. The glint of a gun. I strained to see, but the windows were fogged with rain. I wiped the glass with my hand, just in time to see him drop to his knees beside her. His mother. She was alive. Her face pale, her hands trembling. He touched her cheek, his expression breaking into something so human it hurt to look at. But then, another gunshot. I didn't know where it came from. Adrian's men scattered. He turned sharply, pulling his mother against him as blood bloomed across the ground. I pushed open the door, ignoring the shouts to stay back. The air was cold and heavy. When I reached him, he was holding her, whispering in a voice I'd never heard before, fragile, desperate, childlike. In that moment, I realized he wasn't the king of this empire. He was still that boy from the painting, clutching at the one person who made him believe he could be loved. She lifted a shaking hand, tracing words into his palm with her fingers. He understood instantly. His throat tightened as he whispered, "I know, Mama. I know." I stood there, frozen, as the sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Too late, too far. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were no longer gray. They were black with vengeance. "Whoever did this," he said quietly, "will burn." And in that moment, I knew the next time I saw him, he wouldn't just be fighting for her. He'd be fighting against himself. By morning, the mansion no longer felt like a home. It was a fortress preparing for war. The air smelled of gun oil and rain-soaked earth. Men whispered in the hallways with their hands on their weapons, eyes sharper than before. Someone had betrayed him, someone close. And in Adrian's world, betrayal was a death sentence. I watched from the balcony as he spoke to his men in the courtyard, his voice low, deliberate, deadly calm. No shouting, no threats, just quiet authority that carried more weight than any bullet could. When he looked up, his eyes met mine through the misting rain. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw the man who had touched me so gently the night before. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating stare of the man everyone feared. I didn't see him for hours after that. The sound of doors slamming and cars speeding off filled the day, like thunder following lightning. The body from the night before was gone. So was the device they found. But the silence that settled afterward was heavier than blood. Every corner of the house whispered suspicion. Even I began to wonder if I'd somehow been the cause of this. If just being near him had made him vulnerable. When Adrian finally appeared, it was nearly evening. He looked different. The kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from holding too much rage inside. He didn't knock before entering my room. He just opened the door and stood there, rain dripping from his hair, his shirt clinging to his chest. "They found the man who planted the device," he said. I hesitated. "Who was it?" He stepped closer, his boots leaving a trail of water across the floor. "Luca." I froze. Luca, the man who'd driven me from the restaurant that first night, who'd made me laugh when everything felt unbearable. I'd trusted him. "Why?" I whispered. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Because I let him." The words hit like a slap. "You..." "What?" He looked at me then, eyes burning with something between fury and regret. "I suspected there was a leak. I needed to know who it was, so I gave him enough rope to hang himself." He paused. "I didn't think he'd put you in danger." I stood, anger rising in my chest. "You used me as bait?" "It wasn't supposed to go that far." His voice softened, but it didn't make it better. "He wasn't supposed to touch you." "But he did," I said, my voice shaking. "And someone almost killed me because of it." Adrian took a step forward. I took one back. He stopped. The distance between us was an invisible line, one we both knew we couldn't cross without breaking something we couldn't fix. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said quietly. "But I need you to understand. In my world, trust isn't given. It's tested. And you passed a test you never should have been part of." I turned away, my hands trembling. "I didn't want to be part of your world at all." He exhaled, the sound weary. "And yet here you are." The rain outside grew heavier, slamming against the windows like the sky itself wanted to drown us both. After a long silence, he said, "I'm leaving tonight." My heart stuttered. "Leaving? Where?" "There's a meeting, a cleanup. I need to make an example." His tone was steel. "After tonight, no one will question where loyalty lies." "And if you don't come back?" He didn't answer at first. Then softly, "Then you'll know what this life costs." He turned to leave, but I couldn't let him walk out like that. I reached for his arm. "Adrian." He stopped. "Is this what loyalty means to you?" I asked. "Killing anyone who betrays you?" He looked down at me, and for a fleeting second I saw the same man who'd once whispered that he wanted to lose control. "No." he said. It means killing the part of yourself that still believes in mercy. And then he was gone. Hours passed. The mansion's walls seemed to absorb the storm outside, every flash of lightning illuminating the ghosts that lived here. His father, his past, the sins he never stopped carrying. I sat by the window, watching the rain blur the world into streaks of silver, wondering what it meant that part of me wanted him to come back, even if it meant he'd done terrible things to survive. It was almost dawn when I heard the cars returning, the growl of engines, the shuffle of boots. I ran to the foyer just as the doors opened. Adrian stepped in, drenched, blood spattered across his sleeve. He looked alive, too alive, like a man who'd stared death in the face and found something worse. "What did you do?" I asked. He didn't answer, right away. He just took off his gloves, tossed them aside, and stared at his hands as if they didn't belong to him anymore. I did what I had to. Did he deserve it? He looked at me, and I wished I hadn't asked. He begged, he said. I told him loyalty isn't about survival. It's about silence. He didn't understand until the end. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. You think this makes you stronger? No. His voice cracked slightly. It makes me empty. He turned to walk past me, but I stepped into his path. Adrian, stop. He froze. Look at you, I said. You think this is strength? This is chains. Every person you kill just tightens them. His expression softened, barely. And you think you can break them? I don't know, I whispered, but I can't stand by and watch you drown in your own vengeance. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The tension between us was unbearable. Love, fear, anger, everything tangled together until it was impossible to tell them apart. Then he reached up, cupped the side of my face, and said something I didn't expect. If I ever hurt you, walk away. Don't look back. Promise me. Don't ask me for that. I have to, he said, because I don't know what I'll become if I lose you too. And just like that, his lips were on mine. Not gentle, not sweet, but desperate. A collision of guilt and need, like two people clinging to the edge of a cliff with nothing left to hold on to. I felt his heartbeat against mine, fast and broken. For a moment, I let myself believe there could still be something human in him. When he finally pulled away, his breath was ragged. You should sleep, he said. Tomorrow, everything changes. But I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Not when I saw the flicker of headlights outside the gate. Not when I realized someone else was watching. Not one of his men, but someone who didn't belong. And in that instant, I understood. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. The morning after Adrian's retaliation felt like a bad dream still bleeding into daylight. The air in the mansion was heavy, charged with something unspoken. Every guard I passed lowered his gaze, their silence louder than gunfire. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the faint ringing of a phone, unanswered. Outside, the courtyard still smelled faintly of gasoline and rain. Whatever Adrian had done the night before, it hadn't ended cleanly. He hadn't come to my room since, and part of me didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. I found him hours later, standing alone in the study. The curtains were drawn, the dim light turning his face into shadows and sharp lines. There was blood on his cuff again, not fresh, but enough to make my stomach twist. Don't tell me it's not yours, I said quietly. He looked up slowly. It's not, he said, voice flat. That's supposed to make me feel better? He poured a drink, his movements precise, detached. You wanted honesty. This is what it looks like. I wanted truth, I said, not silence disguised as strength. He gave a humorless smile. In this life, silence is strength. I took a hesitant step closer. Whose blood is it, Adrian? For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he looked at me with eyes I'd never seen before. Raw, fractured, human. It doesn't matter. He's gone now. That's not good enough. He slammed the glass down, liquid splashing across the desk. Then stop asking questions you don't want the answers to. His voice echoed through the room, too loud, too broken. Then quieter, almost to himself. You think you want to know who I am, but you don't. Because once you do, you'll never be able to look at me the same way again. I didn't flinch. I just held his gaze. Then show me. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, finally, he whispered, I already did. He walked past me toward the door, but before he reached it, I noticed something. A photograph on the desk. Old, worn, folded too many times. A woman, dark-haired and beautiful, standing beside a younger Adrian. Her smile was faint, soft, almost haunting. There was something achingly familiar about her eyes. Who is she? I asked. He froze but didn't turn around. No one you need to worry about. That's not an answer. He turned sharply, his voice low. She was someone I couldn't protect. That's all you need to know. Her name, Adrian. He hesitated, then said it like a confession. Isabella. The name lingered in the air like smoke. I didn't know why, but it made my chest tighten. She was mine, he said softly. Years ago, before all of this. She wanted out. I thought I could give her that. But the moment she walked away, they found her. They made an example out of her to remind me that love is a weakness. And now you think the same thing is happening again? I said. He didn't deny it. Someone's watching us, I continued. I saw headlights outside last night. It wasn't your men. His expression darkened. Where? By the front gate. They didn't move, just watched. He swore under his breath, pulling out his phone. Within seconds, his tone switched from restrained to deadly. Double the patrols. Check the perimeter cameras. I want faces. He hung up, then looked back at me. You should have told me sooner. I was afraid of what you'd do. He stepped closer, his voice a quiet warning. You should be afraid of what they'll do if we don't stop them first. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Two people trapped in the same storm, trying to pretend it wasn't already swallowing us whole. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and something in his expression changed. What? I asked. He looked up slowly. They found a car matching your description parked near the old river road. Burned. My heart dropped. My car? I haven't driven it in weeks. They weren't after your car. He pocketed the phone. They were sending a message. Adrian, what does that mean? It means, he said, stepping closer, that whoever's watching us knows exactly who you are and what you mean to me. The words hit harder than I expected, not because of the danger, but because of what they implied. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. His touch was gentle again, almost trembling. I swore I'd never make the same mistake twice, he murmured. But then you walked into that restaurant and everything I built started to fall apart. I didn't ask you to save me, I whispered. He smiled faintly, his thumb still on my cheek. And that's why I can't stop. Before I could respond, the door burst open. Marco, one of his most trusted men, rushed in, his face pale. Boss, you need to see this. Adrian's eyes narrowed. What is it? Marco handed him a small, sealed envelope. Adrian tore it open. Inside was a single photograph. When he saw it, his hand clenched so tightly the paper nearly ripped. What is it? I asked again, my voice barely steady. He didn't answer, but he turned the photo toward me. It was grainy, taken from a distance. Me, standing at the restaurant on my last night before all this began. But behind me, blurred by light, was a woman's silhouette. I looked closer. Same dark hair. Same posture. Same faint smile. "Isabella," I breathed. "It's not possible," Adrian said under his breath. "She's dead." Marco looked uneasy. "Whoever sent this wants you to think she's not." Adrian dropped the photo onto the desk, pacing like a man on the edge of breaking. "They're playing with ghosts now." But something about the picture chilled me deeper than fear. The woman's hand in the photo. There was something off about it. The way her fingers curved, the faint scar across her palm. I'd seen it before. On the waitress who worked the morning shift at the cafe near the mansion. The one who'd smiled too much, who never met my eyes when she handed me coffee. "Adrian," I whispered. "I think she's real." He turned to me sharply. "What are you talking about?" "She's been here. Close. I've seen her." For a moment, he just stared. Then the realization hit. His expression shifted from disbelief to fury, then something colder. "If that's true," he said, his voice like glass breaking, "then she's been watching us for weeks." He moved toward the door, his hand reaching for the gun holstered at his side. "Wait, what are you going to do?" I asked. "End it." I grabbed his arm. "Adrian, if it's really her..." He looked at me, eyes wild, haunted. "If it's her, Lena, then everything I thought I buried just came back to destroy you too." He pulled away, storming out, the door slamming behind him. And for the first time since I'd met him, I realized Adrian Moretti wasn't afraid of his enemies. He was afraid of his past. The mansion felt colder that morning, as if the walls themselves were aware of what had been revealed the night before. Adrian didn't sleep. He moved silently through the halls, checking locks, questioning guards, tracing every possible path the woman in the photograph might have taken. The air smelled faintly of gunpowder and rain, and even the guards avoided our eyes, as if they were afraid to breathe around him. I stayed in my room, watching him from the window. Every movement was precise, deliberate, a predator circling a wounded prey. But there was something else beneath the calculation, something raw and vulnerable. I'd seen glimpses of it before, but now it was impossible to ignore. His mother, the betrayal, Isabella, all of it had built a fortress around him, and I was standing just outside the walls, unsure if I wanted to enter or flee. Hours passed. Then the front door opened, and Adrian returned with the photograph in his hand, untouched this time. He didn't see me at first. He was pacing, muttering under his breath. "It doesn't make sense," he said. "She should be dead. Everyone says she's dead. But the proof? It's here." I stepped closer. "Who are you looking for?" He paused, finally noticing me. "Her name is Isabella. She was supposed to be gone years ago, but someone sent this photograph to remind me that the past never dies." I swallowed. "Do you think it's really her?" He shook his head. "I don't know. But whoever it is, they're clever. They know me. They know what will hurt me the most." "Why are you telling me this?" He looked at me then, eyes dark and stormy. "Because you need to understand the stakes. If she's alive, she's dangerous. And if she's dangerous, so am I." I stepped closer, my voice barely a whisper. "And if she's not?" "Then I've been played," he said, voice low and deadly. "And you've been in the crossfire." We both knew that wasn't just speculation. Whoever had taken the photograph, whoever had manipulated events over the past week, had made one thing clear. Lena's safety was leverage. Adrian didn't speak for a long time. He just stared at the photo, running a finger over the edge, tracing the blurred silhouette. Then he lifted his head, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Doubt. Not in his strength, not in his power, but in his judgment. The realization that the past he had buried might still be alive, watching him, waiting. "I need to know who she is," he said finally. "I need to see her. I need to—" His voice broke and he stopped, swallowing hard. "I need to end this." I wanted to say something, anything. But the words caught in my throat. The danger in the room wasn't from outsiders. It was from him, from the storm that raged within, the violence and vulnerability coiled together like a spring ready to snap. He turned abruptly, his gun appearing in his hand with a smooth motion that made my stomach twist. "We're going out," he said. "Where?" "Somewhere they didn't think I'd look." I followed him through the halls, past guards who gave us wary nods. The rain outside had turned to mist, soft and wet against my skin as we stepped into his car. He didn't speak. He didn't look at me. His hands were tight on the wheel, knuckles white, jaw clenched. I realized then that this hunt wasn't just about Isabella. It was about Adrian confronting every mistake he'd ever made, every person he'd lost. The drive was long and silent. Even the city lights felt muted, shadows stretching and twisting in the rain-soaked streets. Finally, he stopped at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. He cut the engine, and the silence pressed in on us, heavier than the dark clouds above. "Stay in the car," he said, voice low. "No matter what happens, stay here." I hesitated. "Adrian, I mean it." He stepped out into the rain, moving toward the warehouse like a shadow. My heart pounded in my chest. I wanted to run, to leave this darkness behind, but something, curiosity, fear, desire, kept me rooted in place. Minutes passed. Then the sound of footsteps, deliberate, heavy, approaching. Adrian's hand came up, gun ready. I held my breath, straining to see through the fogged windshield. A figure emerged from the mist, tall, confident, deliberate. Isabella, or at least the woman in the photograph. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes sharp, scanning the perimeter like she owned the place. And for a heartbeat, I thought Adrian had made a mistake. She wasn't a ghost. She was real. Adrian's voice cut through the tension. "It's her," he said, barely above a whisper. The way he said it, relief, rage, disbelief, made my chest tighten. He moved closer to her, hands up, cautious. But she didn't flinch. She smiled faintly, almost knowingly, as if she had been waiting for this confrontation for years. "You should have stayed gone," he said, voice steady now, dangerous. "I could say the same to you," she replied. Her voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made me shiver. "You're alive," he said. "Everyone told me." "I'm not a ghost," she interrupted. "I'm real, and I've been watching." He stared at her, eyes narrowing. "Watching? Why?" She smiled faintly, her lips a cruel curve. "To see how far you'd go, to see who you'd protect, to see what kind of man you really are." Adrian's hands tightened on his gun, but he didn't move. He wasn't afraid of her. He was measuring, calculating. And I realized then that this confrontation wasn't just about revenge or power. It was about understanding, about truth buried under years of pain and violence. "She's dangerous," I whispered, leaning closer in the car. Adrian didn't answer. He was already moving toward her, slow, deliberate, eyes locked on hers. And in that moment, I knew one thing. The world I had stepped into wasn't just about guns or betrayal. It was about confronting ghosts, the living and the dead, and deciding whether the people we loved could survive the darkness we carried inside. The air thickened with tension. Every step he took toward her was measured, careful. Every glance she gave him was sharp, deliberate. And somewhere in the shadows, I realized I was holding my breath, waiting to see which version of Adrian would emerge. The man I had come to care for, or the monster he'd become when pushed to the edge. The warehouse doors creaked open wider. Rain poured in, slicking the concrete floor. Adrian's gun remained raised, but his eyes betrayed the conflict inside him. Love, rage, loyalty, and doubt. Isabella tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Do you remember me, Adrian?" He didn't answer immediately. Then quietly, so only she could hear, "I never stopped remembering." Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good," she said, "because now you'll remember everything I've endured, and you'll see why I'm here." Before he could react further, a sound, faint but deliberate, echoed from the far corner of the warehouse. A third presence. Someone else had entered. Someone who had been waiting for this confrontation to escalate. Adrian's eyes snapped to the sound, gun rising. Isabella's smile didn't falter, and I knew, without doubt, that nothing about this night would end quietly. Not for Adrian, not for Isabella, not for me. The warehouse was suffocating, heavy with the scent of rain, damp concrete, and tension that coiled around us like a living thing. Adrian's gun remained trained on Isabella, but his movements were precise, careful, controlled. Every inch of his posture screamed danger, but his eyes I'd come to recognize as the only window to the man beneath the darkness, betrayed a vulnerability he would never admit. I stayed hidden in the shadows of the car, my chest tight, realizing I was watching a war I had no right to witness. Isabella didn't move. Her confidence was deliberate, unnerving. She wasn't afraid of Adrian. Not his reputation, not his power, not the bullets he could fire in a heartbeat. She was the storm itself, or perhaps the reflection of one he had buried deep inside himself. "Why are you here?" Adrian's voice was low, measured, but it carried the weight of years I could barely comprehend. "Why now?" Her lips curved, but not with warmth. "Because I want answers," she said. "Because I want to see if the man I knew, the boy you used to be, still exists somewhere beneath the empire you built." He stiffened, jaw tightening. "The boy is dead." "And so is everything else you loved?" she asked, stepping closer, eyes narrowing. "Including the people you swore you'd protect?" His gun didn't falter. His voice didn't waver. "I protect the ones who matter. The rest, they're collateral." I flinched at the word. Collateral. It was precise, brutal, irrevocable. And yet, I had seen him pause the moment he touched me, the moment he swore he'd shield me from danger. He had lines, ones he refused to cross. But tonight, I feared those lines might shatter. "Collateral," she repeated, almost a whisper, a chant. "And yet you let them die before?" Adrian's hands shook slightly, enough for me to notice, though I tried not to show it. His mother's silence, the death of his father, the betrayal of men he trusted, all of it weighed him down in ways Isabella seemed to remember, to exploit. "Enough," he said finally, voice low and dangerous. "This isn't about the past. It's about survival now. And if you want to live, you'll leave." "I've already survived," she said calmly. "I survived because of you. And now, you're going to see why I stayed hidden." Before I could react, she reached into her coat. Adrian's gun fired, echoing like thunder in the warehouse, but it was too late. A second figure emerged behind her, masked, deliberate, and I realized this wasn't just a confrontation between past and present. It was a trap, set long ago, activated now. Adrian cursed under his breath, pivoting to aim at the new threat. But Isabella's eyes were on him, unwavering, almost taunting. "Protect her," she said quietly, nodding toward me. I froze. My presence had been noticed. My heart raced as I realized Adrian's focus wasn't just on survival anymore. It was on me. He moved first. Gunfire erupted, ricocheting off concrete, shattering the illusion of control I had tried to cling to. I ducked instinctively behind the car, pressing my hands to my ears as the chaos unfolded. Adrian's precision was lethal. Every shot calculated, every movement anticipating the next. Yet even as he fought, I saw the hesitation, the split second when he considered his target, measured the risk. And in that moment, I understood. He would sacrifice everything before allowing harm to come to me. Isabella moved with purpose, keeping her distance but never leaving Adrian's line of sight. It was as if she wanted him to see her, to react, to remember. And he did. Every glance, every micro-expression betrayed the years he'd tried to bury. The guilt he carried for the woman he couldn't save. The masked figure lunged, and Adrian fired. The sound rang in my ears, a pulse of violence that left me trembling. When the figure fell, he didn't breathe a sigh of relief. He turned immediately to the next threat. And I realized the truth. Adrian's world wasn't one of winners and losers. It was survival. Pure and unyielding. And anyone caught in the middle, anyone he loved, risked being consumed. The chaos subsided for a moment. Smoke and rain mingled, and I could see the aftermath. A masked intruder on the ground, Isabella standing defiantly. Adrian's chest heaving as he lowered his gun. His eyes met mine through the mist, and I knew he expected me to move. To leave. To flee the danger that had become our lives. I didn't. Adrian, I whispered, stepping out from behind the car. My voice trembled, but my gaze was steady. You don't have to do this alone. He turned fully toward me, a flicker of disbelief crossing his features. You don't understand what I've built, he said quietly. What I've become. If I let anyone close, they die. Then let me help, I said. Let me stand with you. You don't have to carry this alone. His jaw tightened. This isn't a request, Lena. This is my world. If you step inside, there's no coming back. No safety, no mercy, no escape. I know, I said, and I choose it anyway. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he lowered the gun. Not fully, not completely, but enough to let me see that his restraint was a choice. Not a command, not a rule, but a decision born of trust. Or something like it. Do you understand what you're doing? He asked, voice low, a dangerous whisper. You're choosing to be my weakness. I stepped closer. I choose to be yours. The faintest glimmer of a smile crossed his lips, fleeting but real. Then you're braver than I thought. But our moment was shattered by a sound. A radio crackle from one of his men outside. Another threat. Another reminder that the world outside the warehouse wasn't waiting politely while we decided who we were to each other. Adrian cursed under his breath, moving to check the perimeter. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the shadows, then flicked back to me. Stay close, he commanded. No matter what, stay close. I nodded. I will. Hours passed. The city around us was alive with danger, but inside the warehouse, a fragile trust began to form. We weren't safe. We weren't protected. And yet, for the first time, I felt like we were together, even in the eye of the storm. The night stretched on, and eventually we returned to the mansion. Adrian's movements were still cautious, still calculated. But there was something different in the way he carried me through the halls. Not just as a presence to be shielded, but as someone he trusted to survive the darkness with him. In the quiet of his study, he finally spoke, voice low, almost confessional. You know, I've killed people for less than what we just survived tonight. I know, I whispered. And I don't care. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. He studied me for a long moment, his eyes searching mine. "Then I'll have to believe you," he said finally. "Because if I don't, I'll lose you. And I can't survive that." The weight of his words pressed down on me. Not just because of the danger, not just because of what he had done or might do again, but because I realized something undeniable. Adrian Moretti was a man shaped by loss, by violence, by power, and yet, despite it all, he wanted me to stay. And I wanted to. The storm outside raged, rain hammering against the windows, thunder rolling over the city like a warning. But inside, amidst the chaos, the gunfire, and the shadows of betrayal, something had shifted. Adrian had shown me the depth of his loyalty, the extremity of his control, the rawness of his fear. And I had made my choice. I would face it all with him. Because love, dangerous, forbidden, deadly love, had become the only anchor I could cling to. And the next test was coming. I could feel it in the air, in the tension, in the way Adrian's eyes never left the shadows outside. Loyalty would be tested again. Survival would demand sacrifice. And I would have to decide, in the storm of violence and desire, whether I was brave enough to stand by him, not just as a witness, but as a partner, a lover, and maybe the one thing that could keep him human. The mansion never felt so alive, and never so dangerous. Every creak in the floor, every whisper of wind through the rain-soaked windows, sounded like a signal, a prelude to chaos. Adrian didn't sleep. He barely ate. His presence was constant, a shadow at my side, and yet distant in ways I couldn't name. The events of the warehouse, the photograph, Isabella's appearance, all of it had tightened a coil inside him, and I feared that at any moment it might snap. Morning came, but the light brought no comfort. Instead, it illuminated the tension that had settled over the estate like a thick, suffocating fog. I could see it in the men moving through the halls, in Adrian's sharp glances toward the perimeter, and in the way he spoke, his voice low and precise, measured like the edge of a blade. I approached him cautiously in the study, heart racing. "Adrian, you've been awake all night. You need to rest." He didn't look at me, just adjusted a stack of papers on the desk, the movement too controlled to be casual. "Rest is a luxury," he said. "One I can't afford." I stepped closer, daring. "Then let me help. You don't have to do this alone." He finally looked at me, and for a brief moment, I saw the man beneath the monster, the one who had touched me gently, whispered to me softly, the man who had said my presence mattered more than the world he had built. But that moment vanished as quickly as it came. His gaze hardened. "This isn't your world, Lena. If you stay here, if you stand by me, you'll see things you can never unsee." "I know," I whispered. "And I still choose to stay." He studied me, a silent calculation passing behind those dark eyes. Then he exhaled sharply. "Fine. But don't think I won't do whatever it takes to keep you safe. Even if that means putting myself in hell." I wanted to argue, to tell him I didn't care, that I trusted him. But I didn't have the words. And before I could find them, the sound came. The faintest echo at first, a whisper through the halls. Then a crash, a gunshot, the unmistakable thud of bodies hitting the floor. Adrian moved first, all predatory grace and lethal precision. I followed, staying close, heart hammering. The mansion erupted around us, men shouting, footsteps pounding, the unmistakable smell of gunpowder and blood. He barked orders, moved through the chaos like a storm, and I realized that the world I had stepped into wasn't just dangerous. It was violent, brutal, and merciless. I watched him from the corner of my eye, every movement a revelation. This was the Adrian I had glimpsed before, ruthless, commanding, deadly. But he also moved with a purpose, a precision meant to protect. And I understood then that his violence had rules, lines he wouldn't cross unless absolutely necessary, lines he had drawn to preserve something precious. A man appeared from behind a doorway, gun raised. Adrian didn't hesitate. His response was instant, lethal. The man fell, silent. And then he turned toward me, eyes locking onto mine with a look that made my knees weak. "Stay behind me," he ordered. I nodded, too afraid to speak. And then I saw her. Isabella. She had come again, slipping through the chaos, her eyes on Adrian. Her presence was like a knife twisting in the wound of his past, a reminder of mistakes and regrets that could never be undone. "You should have stayed gone," he said, voice low, deadly calm. She smiled faintly, almost pitying. "And you should have remembered," she replied. "Remembered that the past never dies." He moved closer, and I could feel the tension in his body, every muscle coiled like a spring. He wasn't afraid of her. He was wary, calculated, aware of every possible outcome. And yet I saw something else. A vulnerability he would never admit aloud. Gunfire erupted again, and I pressed myself against the wall, heart racing. Adrian fired, every shot precise, deliberate. He moved toward Isabella, forcing her to the edge of the room, but not attacking her outright. He wanted answers, not death, at least not yet. "Why now?" he demanded. "Why appear after all these years?" She didn't flinch. "Because you needed to remember," she said. "Because someone needed to remind you that loyalty can be broken, that love can be a weapon, and that people like me never truly disappear." His jaw tightened. "You're dangerous." "I've always been," she said, calm and unyielding. "And now you'll see what happens when your past collides with your present." I realized then that this was no longer about Isabella alone. The attack, the chaos. It was orchestrated to test Adrian, to push him to the brink, to see if he would protect the people he cared about or succumb to the darkness inside him. Adrian's eyes flicked to me, and for the first time I saw fear there. Not for himself, but for me. "Lena," he said, voice low. "Get out of here." I shook my head. "I'm not leaving you." His expression softened, but only for a heartbeat. Then he moved, every motion precise, taking down the intruders with a calculated fury that left no room for hesitation. Isabella watched, a ghost of judgment in her eyes, and I understood. Adrian's loyalty wasn't just tested by threats, by enemies, by gunfire. It was tested by the people he loved, by the lives he was willing to risk, by the choices he had to make when everything he cared about was in danger. When the last intruder fell, silence returned. The mansion was still, heavy with the aftermath of violence. Adrian's chest heaved as he lowered his gun, eyes scanning the room. Then he turned to me, and I saw it. Exhaustion, relief, and something else. Vulnerability. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "I chose to be," I replied, voice firm despite the fear still coursing through me. "I stay because I trust you, because I believe in you." He studied me for a long moment, then exhaled. "You have no idea what you've signed up for." "I do," I whispered, "and I accept it, all of it." He shook his head, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "You're braver than I deserve." But our moment of fragile connection was interrupted. Another sound. Soft, deliberate footsteps approaching from the shadows. Isabella. She had survived, silent and composed, her eyes on Adrian. "You still don't understand," she said. "This isn't over, and it never will be." Adrian's hand moved to his gun again, but he didn't fire. Instead, he took a step forward, closing the space between them, his presence magnetic, dangerous, and commanding. "Then teach me," he said. "Teach me how to end this." Her eyes flickered, and for a moment, I thought she would smile or speak, but she only shook her head. "Some things can't be taught. Some ghosts are meant to follow you forever." Adrian's jaw clenched. "Then I'll carry it." He turned toward me, and I felt the weight of his gaze, not just as a protector, but as a man who had faced death, betrayal, and loss, and yet still found a reason to fight. For me. I stepped closer, reaching for his hand. "Then we carry it together," I whispered. He looked down at me, eyes dark, stormy, and unguarded. "Together," he said. And in that moment, the mansion felt smaller, the storm outside quieter. For a fleeting heartbeat, we were not enemies, not ghosts, not survivors of battles past. We were just two people clinging to each other amidst the chaos, understanding that loyalty was not just a word, it was a choice, a risk, and sometimes a sacrifice that demanded everything. The night stretched on, quiet for the first time in hours. And though danger still lingered beyond the walls, though Isabella's presence was a shadow over us, and though Adrian's enemies had tested him in ways I could scarcely imagine, we had survived. Together. And yet, as I looked at him, I knew that the next test, the one that would challenge not just loyalty, but love itself, was coming. The darkness was patient. It was relentless. And it would not let us go easily. But for now, Adrian had chosen me. And I had chosen him. In a world of violence, betrayal, and shadows, that choice was more dangerous than any gun, more powerful than any threat, and more binding than anything I had ever known. The mansion was eerily silent that night, a fragile calm after the storm that had battered us for days. The rain had stopped, leaving a cold mist curling around the gardens, and the city beyond was distant, muted. Inside, the weight of everything we had endured pressed down on us. The attacks, the betrayals, the ghosts of the past. Yet the tension was different now. It was no longer just survival. It was decision. It was culmination. It was the moment where everything hung in balance. Adrian didn't speak at first. He moved through the halls with measured steps, the gun at his side, eyes scanning shadows as though expecting them to spring to life. But even as he maintained his lethal composure, there was a subtle shift I hadn't noticed before, a vulnerability behind his gaze that only I could see. "I've cleared the mansion," he said quietly, voice low, almost a whisper meant for me alone. "There's no one here. For now." I stepped closer, feeling the tension in his shoulders, the tightness of his jaw, the restless energy coiled inside him. "Then we decide," I said. "We decide what comes next. Together." He stopped, finally turning toward me. His eyes, dark and stormy, held something I had never fully understood before. Fear, not for himself, but for me. And beneath that fear, an intensity, a need, a raw honesty that made my heart ache. "Lena." His voice faltered for the briefest moment, enough to make me step closer. "I've lived my life surrounded by shadows, by choices that destroy everyone I care about. And now, you're here. You've chosen me, even knowing everything. Do you understand what that means?" "I do," I said, voice steady despite the fear curling in my chest. "I'm not afraid. I choose you, Adrian, even if the world burns around us." He studied me, as if measuring the weight of my words, my intent, my soul. And then, slowly, he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. His touch was gentle, deliberate, almost reverent. "You're braver than anyone I've ever known," he whispered. The quiet stretched, a delicate pause in the storm of our lives. But it didn't last. The door creaked open, faint but deliberate, and I realized we were not alone. Isabella. She stepped into the light, her expression unreadable, the faintest smirk tugging at her lips. "You really thought it would be that easy?" she asked. "That after everything, the storm would simply pass?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "It ends tonight," he said, voice low and dangerous. "Whatever you want, whatever you think, it ends now." She tilted her head, eyes sharp. "Do you even know what you're asking? Do you understand the cost?" "I understand everything," he said, and I saw it then. The resolve that had been building in him for days, weeks, years. The man beneath the power, the ruthlessness, the empire. He wasn't afraid of death. He wasn't afraid of danger. He was afraid of losing what mattered most. I stepped forward. "You're not alone," I whispered. "We face it together." He glanced at me, eyes softening, almost human for a heartbeat. "Stay behind me," he said. But the tension in his body betrayed the stakes, the peril of the night, the magnitude of the choice before us. Gunfire erupted, sharp and sudden, tearing through the silence. Isabella had moved with precision, a calculated strike meant to push him to his limits. I dove behind a pillar, heart racing, every instinct screaming danger. Adrian moved like a shadow, lethal, deliberate, every shot measured, every movement precise. And yet I could see the strain, the toll of years of violence pressing down on him, threatening to break him. Through the chaos, he kept one eye on me. Every instinct, every thought, every action was intertwined with the knowledge that my life, my choice, my presence, mattered more than anything else. Isabella pressed forward, forcing him into a corner. Her movements were deliberate, taunting, testing. "You've always protected the people you love," she said. "But can you protect them from yourself?" Adrian's response was a roar, both literal and metaphorical, a release of every ounce of control he had kept bottled for years. Gunfire and chaos erupted again, the world around us shaking. And yet, in the midst of it, I realized something profound. Adrian's power wasn't just in his hands, his strategy, his ruthlessness. It was in his ability to choose, to decide who lives, who dies, who matters, who doesn't. He moved toward Isabella with purpose, but something in his eyes shifted. Not rage, not vengeance, sadness, guilt. And then, something I had never seen before. Love. Not for her, not for the past, but for me, for the present, for the fragile life we were trying to protect together. I saw it in the tilt of his head, the pause in his stride, the hesitation that spoke volumes. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for us. For the possibility that we could emerge from this storm intact, that we could choose each other despite the darkness. The final confrontation was brutal but swift. Adrian's movements were precise, calculated. Isabella, formidable as she was, could not match the storm of skill, strategy, and raw determination that he unleashed. When it was over, she lay on the ground, defeated but alive, a warning and a reminder of the ghosts we could never escape. Adrian turned to me then, chest heaving, eyes dark and intense. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head. "No, but that was too close." He closed the distance between us, brushing a strand of wet hair from my face. His hands cupped my cheeks, eyes searching mine. "You understand now?" he said softly. "This is the life I live. The danger, the choices, the chaos. And yet, I want you in it. I choose you, Lena. Despite everything, because you make me human again." Tears pricked my eyes. "And I choose you. I don't care about the danger. I don't care about the past. I care about you." He leaned in slowly, deliberately, his forehead resting against mine. "Then we face it together," he whispered. "No secrets, no lies, no ghosts between us, only us." I nodded, pressing my hands to his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath my palms. Only us, I echoed. The storm outside subsided, leaving a quiet, fragile peace. The mansion was still, the city beyond muted, and for a moment, it felt as if the world itself was holding its breath. We stood together in the aftermath, survivors not just of the night, but of every choice, every betrayal, every shadow that had ever haunted us. Adrian's hands tightened around mine. "There's still danger," he murmured. "There always will be. But I swear to you, I will protect you. Not because I have to, not because it's expected, but because I want to. Because I love you." I pressed my forehead to his, closing my eyes. "I know, and I trust you. With everything." For the first time since I met him, I felt safe. Not just from enemies, not just from ghosts of the past, but from the fear that had always lived inside me. The fear that love could be deadly, that passion could destroy, that trust could be a weapon. In Adrian's arms, I realized that love wasn't just survival. It was salvation. He kissed me then, slow, deliberate, and full of promise. Not a kiss of possession, not of dominance, but of understanding, of connection, of shared scars and mutual choice. Every fear, every doubt, every danger melted away in that single moment. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine again. "We survived," he whispered, "and we will continue to survive. Together." I nodded, heart full, soul quieted by the knowledge that this man, dangerous, ruthless, and heartbreakingly human, was mine, and I was his. Despite the shadows, despite the ghosts, despite the world that would always test us, we had chosen each other. And in that choice, we had found a fragile, beautiful kind of eternity. The mansion around us was silent, but our hearts were loud, beating together in rhythm, defiant, alive, and unbroken. Outside, the city slept, oblivious to the storm that had raged and ended in these walls. Inside, we remained, two people bound not just by circumstance, but by choice, by love, and by the unshakable understanding that whatever came next, we would face it side by side. For the first time in years, Adrian's world, dark, violent, and merciless, felt like a place where I belonged. Not because it was safe, not because it was easy, but because he had chosen me. And I had chosen him. The ghosts of the past would linger, shadows would follow, and danger would always knock at the door. But we had survived it all. And in our survival, we had discovered something stronger than fear, stronger than power, stronger than vengeance, each other. And that was enough.